Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, if you've ever scrolled through travel photos or maybe looked at a new job opportunity overseas or just met someone from a different culture, I think almost everyone has felt that little pang of desire.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of, I wish I spoke their language.
Exactly. I wish I could connect on that level.
It's probably one of the most universally desired skills, just the ability to connect with the world in a different way. And yet it's also probably one of the most abandoned projects people take on.
Right. People get really excited. They buy the apps. They watch all the YouTube videos. They spend maybe a month cramming vocabulary, and then they just hit a wall.
They do. It just stops.
Yeah. And our mission today is to really take a deep, systematic look at how we learn languages. We've synthesized a whole lot of research and practical strategies into, well, a 10-step method. And it's designed specifically for the person who's maybe tried and failed before, or maybe for the one who's just convinced they don't have the time or, the talent for it.
And the sources we've pulled together, they all promise one thing. You can learn. It's not about talent, it's that the method is absolutely crucial.
Right.
And I think this approach is, well, it's kind of revolutionary in its simplicity. It completely dismisses this idea of language hacking or, getting fluent in 90 days.
Which just sets people up for failure.
It does. It really does. Instead, it focuses on the slow, easy, step-by-step process. And that process guarantees results because it prioritizes confidence and consistency over just raw speed.
So we're building linguistic muscle memory, not just cramming for a test you're going to forget a week later.
Exactly. You're building something that lasts.
And the sources, they really outline a complete roadmap. They acknowledge all the real cognitive friction points. That initial feeling of being overwhelmed, the difficulty of just making words stick, and of course, the big one, the fear of speaking.
It's a method built on the psychology of how habits and memory actually work.
So we have to set the stage here, right? Because that initial feeling of novelty where everything, the sounds, the rhythm, the grammar, it just feels like noise. That's normal.
It's totally normal. In fact, that's what drives most people away.
Yeah.
So this deep dive, it's about giving you the tools to manage that initial disorientation, to leverage, basic neuroplasticity to your advantage, starting right from absolute zero.
Okay, let's unpack this then, starting with what feels like the most critical first step. Managing expectations and setting goals. Because if the starting line feels like it's a marathon away, you'll never even put on your running shoes.
You won't even start the race. That's a perfect way to put it.
So this initial phase, it's all about being overwhelmed, isn't it?
Completely. I mean, think about it. If you look at the total scope of a new language, you're talking tens of thousands of words, complex grammar rules, conjugations. It's cognitively paralyzing.
Your brain just shuts down.
It does. It goes into self-preservation mode because the perceived effort required is just way too high.
And that's exactly why. Part 1, the power of simple goals, is the foundation for everything else. We're not even really talking about motivation at this point.
Right.
It's more about habit formation.
Right. The sources are so insistent on this, you have to dismantle that overwhelming task into what behavior scientists call minimum viable effort.
Minimum viable effort. I like that.
Yeah. Because if a goal is too large, like say, I'm going to master French grammar in 3 months, the cognitive load required to even start is immense.
So you just procrastinate. You'll do it tomorrow.
We'll always do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because the cost of entry mentally is too high. Small and simple goals, they eliminate that decision fatigue and they minimize the activation energy you need to just begin.
Okay, let's talk specifics here. Because the numbers that are suggested are, they're intentionally tiny.
Almost ridiculously so.
Right. Like we're talking about learning 10 new words this week. Not this day, this week.
Which is less than 2 words a day.
So why is setting the bar that low actually the smartest strategy? It feels counterintuitive.
It feels that way, but it guarantees a win. That's the secret. If you aim for 10 words, maybe you learn 12 or even 15, and you feel successful, you feel like you've overachieved.
And that feeling matters.
It's everything. The moment you achieve that small goal, your brain releases a little bit of dopamine. It's a reward signal. And that signal reinforces the behavior. We're consciously creating what Charles Duhigg calls a habit loop.
Okay, so the action is tiny. Yeah. Learn 2 words. But the reward is actually big. That instant feeling of success and, I guess, confidence.
Exactly. And confidence is the currency of perseverance in this whole game.
The sources have other examples too, like practicing listening for just 5 minutes every day.
Just 5 minutes?
Or saying one simple sentence every morning when you wake up. Today's Tuesday, something like that. 5 minutes is It's non-negotiable. You can't say you don't have 5 minutes.
It's a non-threatening amount of time. And when you look at language acquisition through the lens of habit, that 5 minutes of listening every single day is so much more powerful than 90 minutes of intense study once a week.
Because you forget so much in between those big sessions.
You do. The consistent daily exposure, it just keeps those new neural pathways active. So the key takeaway, and the sources really emphasize this, is that every small step, no matter how tiny, it brings you closer to success.
Because the cumulative effect of all those small, sustained wins, it just completely overcomes the demotivation you feel from a huge, unattainable goal.
Right. You're building momentum, brick by tiny brick.
So, okay, if we accept that we're accumulating these small wins, we also have to prepare for the inevitable, the plateau.
Ah, yes.
The great plateau.
And that brings us right to part 7 of this method. Staying patient with yourself and just acknowledging that that initial rush of progress, it's going to fade.
And this is where most people quit. This is the exit ramp for 90% of learners.
Why there?
Because they experience that high-speed progress of the beginner phase. You know, the jump from knowing zero to being able to say hello and thank you and order a coffee. It feels huge.
It does, yeah. Then they hit that intermediate level, and the growth curve just flattens drastically. And all of a sudden, they feel slow. They feel stuck.
And the immediate internal reaction is, oh, I must be bad at this, or I've lost my momentum.
This isn't working anymore.
Right. So how does the material help us reframe that psychologically?
It normalizes the experience completely. This slowdown isn't a failure. It's actually a necessary transition.
A transition to what?
Well, in cognitive science, you see something related called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where beginners often overestimate their ability early on because the small gains feel so massive.
Right, you feel like a genius for learning 10 words.
Exactly. Then, when they realize the sheer complexity of true fluency, their confidence just crashes. So the sources, they characterize learning a language explicitly as not a race. It's a long, beautiful journey. And that patience has to be applied internally.
So what's happening in the brain is that we're moving from what's called declarative memory, so consciously knowing the rules, to procedural memory.
That's it, exactly. Procedural memory is subconsciously and automatically applying the rules without thinking. And that transition is slow, it's often frustrating, and it requires immense patience.
Because you can't see it happening?
You can't. It demands patience and, frankly, kindness to yourself. Your brain is literally restructuring itself, and that process is invisible on a day-to-day basis.
So if you treat yourself with criticism during that plateau,
you introduce stress. And stress is the enemy of learning. The moment we feel stuck, we have to remind ourselves, I am not failing, I am consolidating. My brain is filing things away.
And that leads perfectly into part 10, which the sources just call the mind part. It's the critical importance of belief in your own sense of capability.
Yes.
Because it's often those plateaus that trigger all of those self-sabotaging thoughts.
It is. It's the classic negative internal monologue, isn't it? I'm too old, my brain is fixed, or I'm too busy. My favorite is, I'm just not wired for languages.
Yeah, the language gene myth.
Right. And those thoughts are incredibly toxic because they give you a perfect excuse to stop trying.
And the sources, they're really emphatic about this.
Yeah.
They directly address and refute these ideas. They say these negative thoughts are just not true.
They're not. And we need to move beyond just simple affirmation here and talk about the neuroscientific basis for why they're not true.
Okay, let's do that.
So this concept that the brain loses its capacity for learning after childhood, it's just false. It's a complete myth.
But children do learn faster.
Right. They have heightened plasticity, yes, but adult brains retain neuroplasticity well into old age. Learning a complex new skill, especially like language, it literally causes changes in your brain structure.
You mean physically?
Physically, it increases the density of gray matter in the areas related to language processing.
So saying I'm too old isn't just a bad attitude, it's demonstrably incorrect from a biological standpoint.
Yeah.
The brain is literally designed to grow and change based on what you feed it.
And consistent practice is the nutrient. That's the food.
So your capability is directly linked to your effort and, crucially, your belief.
Yes, the belief part is key. When you believe you're capable, you're so much more likely to commit the consistent effort that's required to trigger that neural restructuring.
And if you start with the conviction that you're going to fail,
you engage in unconscious confirmation bias. You'll selectively notice every difficult moment, every forgotten word, as proof that you were right all along. See, I knew I couldn't do this.
And we can tie this right back to the beginning. If you cultivate the belief that you can learn, even just a little bit, you're far more likely to successfully complete those small, simple goals we talked about.
Of course.
And that success, in turn, provides you with tangible evidence that strengthens your belief. It creates this powerful, self-reinforcing, virtuous cycle.
Yes, exactly. So this foundation, simple goals, radical self-patience, and an unwavering belief in your own capability, that's the scaffolding for the whole project. Without it, the whole thing just collapses the moment it gets a little difficult.
Okay, so now that we've established a really solid mental foundation, let's switch gears to the practical strategies.
Ah.
How do we actually absorb the language itself? We're moving into section 2 now, starting with input. How do we listen effectively?
Right. This is fun.
So part 2 of the method champions the priority of passive listening. Now, this runs completely counter to the typical beginner's instinct, which is to immediately try to translate every single word they hear.
The panic translation mode.
Yeah, exactly. And the instruction here is so simple. Just listen. That's it.
The sources suggest this because passive listening is the ultimate low-pressure getaway. It's an immediate action that requires almost zero cognitive effort compared to, say, intensive grammar study.
But the key is understanding the why. Why should I listen if I don't understand what's being said?
That's the question everyone asks.
Right. If I'm listening to a conversation in a language I can't decode, isn't that just background noise? How does the research prove the brain is actually absorbing anything structural?
Because it's absorbing what you could call the acoustic map. Your brain, especially your auditory cortex, is a pattern matching machine. It's constantly trying to make sense of incoming sounds.
Okay.
So when you passively listen, you are training your ear to filter the phones, the smallest units of sound, that are specific to that language. If your native language doesn't use certain sounds, your brain actually actively filters them out as irrelevant noise.
So passive listening is basically just calibration for your ear. We're forcing the brain to recognize the specific rhythm, the intonation, the stress patterns that make the target language sound the way it does.
Exactly. You're separating it from the noise floor. Even without translation, the brain starts to build these unconscious templates for pronunciation and for sentence structure. It's all preparatory work.
It's like installing the right sound drivers for a new computer program.
That is a perfect analogy. So when you later learn the vocabulary, the sound of the word is already partially familiar to your brain, which makes recognition and retention so much easier.
And the recommended sources for this passive listening, they're crucial for keeping the pressure low. Things like podcasts made for learners, short videos, slow stories, or really simple conversations.
Yeah, the material shouldn't be frustratingly complex. You're not trying to understand a university lecture.
Yeah.
The analogy that's provided in the sources is really profound. It says that listening daily, even for just 5 minutes, is like watering a plant. You don't see explosive growth day to day, but the plant requires that steady, small input to grow strong roots. If you listen every day, you maintain constant acoustic exposure. You're ensuring the brain never fully drops its guard on processing those new sounds.
So that consistency is the magic, much more than one big session.
It's everything. It far surpasses intermittent exposure.
Okay, so that constant, gentle acoustic exposure prepares us for the next, equally crucial cognitive shift: how we approach vocabulary. This is part 5. Learning with context versus relying on those long, boring lists.
Ah, the dreaded vocabulary list.
I think everyone has a traumatic memory of this from high school language class. Memorizing lists. Table, chair, dog, blue.
It's pure rote memorization. It relies almost entirely on declarative memory, the memory of facts and events, and it's incredibly fragile. It's easily forgotten, especially under pressure.
Well, the challenge is that when you're in a real conversation and you need that word, your brain has no situational anchor to retrieve it quickly. It's just an abstract label floating around in your head.
Exactly. So the sources advocate so strongly for learning words in context. We want to engage episodic memory. That's memory tied to specific experiences, emotions, and situations.
So when you learn a word within a story, a situation, or most critically, a full sentence, you give that word functional meaning.
And you give it multiple retrieval hooks. Your brain has more pathways to find it.
Let's use the specific example they provided. Instead of just learning the word apple, we learn the sentence, I am eating an apple. Why is framing it that way so much more powerful for the brain?
Because the word apple is now linked to an action, which is eating, a subject I, and a tense or reality, I'm eating.
Ah, okay.
So when you later try to recall the word apple, Your brain doesn't just search a mental dictionary list. It searches for the last time you used it in an active, embodied scenario. And that retrieval path is so much quicker and more robust.
This also seems to address grammar implicitly, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, if I learned 5 sentences that all use the present continuous tense correctly, like I am eating, she's walking, they are reading, I've started to internalize that grammatical structure without ever opening a textbook on verb conjugation.
Precisely. You are learning the structural patterns through exposure, not through memorizing rules. And this insight, it just shows that learning this way gives the word a functional meaning, which helps the brain remember it more easily.
Because retrieval practice is built into the learning process from the start. You're learning a tool, not just a concept.
That's right.
So the practical application here is simple. When you encounter a new word, don't just write down the translation. Write down the entire sentence it was in.
Or if you're using an app or a flashcard system, input the full sentence, not just the isolated word.
Yeah, that strategy immediately moves you out of that dry academic approach and into the domain of actual functional communication. You're building with sentence blocks, not just isolated bricks.
You're ready to communicate from day one.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting though. Now that we've absorbed the language passively, we've learned some vocabulary contextually. We face the great psychological leap, the output.
The moment of truth.
How do we push past the fear and actually start speaking?
Well, this brings us to part 3, which is arguably the most intimidating point for any learner. Embracing mistakes in speaking.
It is terrifying for a lot of people.
It is. I mean, the brain's core function is efficiency, and speaking a foreign language is profoundly inefficient at the beginning, so we worry. We worry intensely about sounding foolish or, being misunderstood.
And that fear isn't irrational. It's a social fear. We're worried about being judged or maybe causing confusion or offense. We have to acknowledge that fear before we can try to overcome it.
Absolutely. And the sources, they offer immense reassurance here. They do it by stating a necessary truth from language acquisition theory, which is, mistakes are not a problem. They are part of learning.
Not just a part of it, they're essential data points.
They're essential. When you make a mistake, you activate a powerful feedback loop. You get a confused look or a correction, and that immediately signals to your brain that the pattern you just used was incorrect.
In other words, silence guarantees you learn nothing, but a mistake guarantees you get specific, targeted feedback.
It's evidence that your system needs a little debugging. That's all it is.
Right. And we can use the analogy of a baby learning to talk, which is a technique the sources use to provide some comfort here.
Yeah, a baby doesn't stop trying to talk when they make a mistake. They keep attempting to communicate because the drive to connect is so much stronger than the fear of error.
And we are functionally in the same position. We have to prioritize communication over perfection.
That mindset shift is huge. It's everything. And we're encouraged to speak slowly, speak simply, and speak every day. The focus is purely on getting the message across. You're not trying to dazzle anyone with perfect grammar.
No, not at all.
And this is where we need those low-stakes starter sentences that the material provides. Things like, my name is, or I like.
I want to learn, or today I feel.
Yes. If you just commit to using those 4 structures every day, you're generating output. You're building confidence with really high utility language, and you're forcing the language to become a motor skill, not just intellectual knowledge.
So once we've managed to speak those initial phrases, how do we solidify them? How do we make sure they transition from being something we have to strain to remember to something that just rolls off the tongue automatically?
Right, and that's part 4. Repetition as a key friend.
Repetition.
Yeah.
It often sounds so tedious.
It does, but it's the foundational mechanism for myelination.
Can you explain that?
Sure. Myelination is the process where your nervous system speeds up the transmission of signals along a neural pathway. When you repeat something, you are literally paving and widening that road for faster, more effortless recall.
So we're not just talking about rote repetition, like saying a word 100 times in an hour?
No, God, no. We're talking about the science of the spacing effect and retrieval practice.
Okay, so what does the source material recommend in terms of method?
The material stresses that this kind of repetition helps the brain remember words naturally. The goal isn't just to repeat, but to retrieve the information repeatedly, with increasing intervals between the practice sessions.
So like if I learn a new phrase today, I should repeat it 5 times. Then tomorrow, maybe 3 times.
And once more the day after that.
Exactly. You are forcing your brain to work just a little bit harder to recall it each time, which is what consolidates the memory.
So we need varied methods of repetition to keep the brain engaged. We can repeat by, say, reading our notes again.
Or listening to the same short audio segment again. Or ideally, by speaking the same sentence again, but in a new context.
Yeah, and combining part 2, listening, with part 4, repetition, is incredibly efficient.
How so?
Listen to a short 5-minute dialogue on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. By Wednesday, your repetition has moved that content from your fleeting short-term memory into robust long-term storage.
And often without you consciously realizing you've memorized anything.
Exactly. Repetition is simple, but its neurological power is just immense.
Okay, so now we come to the payoff. The whole reason we started this journey in the first place. Part 8, using the language in real life. The sources stress this is one of the most important steps.
It's a transition from the laboratory of study to actual application in the wild.
Right. This is where we validate the entire process.
It's crucial because real-life practice introduces chaos. It introduces the unpredictability of a genuine interaction. A language app will never tell you, sorry, I can't hear you over the sound of this espresso machine.
That's a great point. It forces you to deal with native speed, with varied accents, background noise, contextual ambiguity, all the messy stuff.
All the real stuff.
So why is confronting that real-life challenge so important for our motivation?
Because it provides immediate, visible progress and validation. The learner gets that essential aha moment, the realization of, wow, I didn't just study this word, I successfully ordered food with it.
And that validation is a massive confidence booster. It
Yeah.
directly fuels that belief structure we were talking about building in part 10.
It does, and the sources list really achievable low-stakes examples for this.
Right, like write a short message.
Fast.
Or talk to a friend who's also learning.
Or order food. Ask a simple question, even just leave a comment on a YouTube video in that language. These are all micro victories.
Let's just consider the specific anxiety around ordering food for a second. You know you have the 5 words you need, but the social pressure feels so high.
It does.
But if you successfully manage to say, I would like a coffee, please, and you are understood.
The fear response associated with speaking diminishes permanently in that context. Every small, real moment adds up over time, and it moves the language from a collection of facts, that declarative memory, to an automated skill, procedural memory.
So this is how you embed the language into your identity. It becomes something you do, not just something you know.
Yes, that's the goal.
Okay, so that shift from fearing an interaction to successfully navigating a simple transaction is critical. We've set the foundation, we've managed input and output. The final question is about sustainability. How do we ensure this journey continues, not as a struggle, but as a joyful part of life?
And that brings us to part 6, making learning fun.
Right.
If the process is only characterized by discipline and dry textbooks, you're fighting your own biology. The core premise here is that learning shouldn't feel like a hard job.
Well, we tend to gravitate toward things that provide positive feedback. So if we can link language learning to activities that we already enjoy, that already give us relaxation, we minimize the psychological barriers to doing it.
That's the psychological leverage right there. Enjoyment boosts motivation and it boosts learning speed. A happy mind, a mind that's fueled by curiosity and dopamine, just learns faster.
Whereas stress and boredom,
They actively inhibit the prefrontal cortex, which is essential for focused learning.
so we need to integrate the language into our leisure time. We're essentially creating a kind of gentle immersion environment right in our own homes.
That's a great way to put it.
So what are the high-yield, fun activities that are recommended?
They're all highly accessible. Watch movies in the language, listen to songs, read simple stories, play games, follow funny YouTubers. The key here is not rigorous analysis, it's just exposure.
You're letting those passive listening schools from part 2 work their magic, but in a really engaging context.
Right, so if you love cooking, maybe you watch simple cooking videos in the target language. If you love pop music, try to understand the lyrics of a song. It's language that's incidental to the entertainment.
If it's less like studying.
Exactly. When you listen to a song, you might not understand 80% of it. But the part you do understand is immediately more memorable because it's attached to rhythm and emotion and melody.
So this is contextual learning applied to pure fun. And it ensures that the learning process is inherently self-sustaining.
It is.
But enjoyment needs some structure, right? To prevent it from just becoming random. And that brings us to part 9, building a simple daily routine. This feels like the difference between a fleeting adapt and a permanent lifestyle change.
It is. This point clarifies the distinction perfectly. Success is not about studying for 3 hours once a week.
Where you probably spend the first hour just reviewing everything you forgot since the last session.
That's it. It's about consistency. It's about minimizing the forgetting curve.
The science on this is so clear. Massive intermittent effort is just inefficient. It's the small, highly consistent efforts that build neural momentum. Your brain needs those daily cues to keep the language active in your working memory.
And the sources provide a really detailed structure for maximizing those short periods. Specifically, they advocate for what they call the 20-minute model.
And this model succeeds because it minimizes decision fatigue.
Right. You don't have to decide what to study. The routine decides for you. And it ensures you're developing all your skills comprehensively.
So let's break down the mechanics of this 20-minute model, because its genius is really in the segmentation. It's 5 minutes listening, 5 minutes speaking, 5 minutes reading, and 5 minutes writing.
This structure is designed to leverage cognitive variety. By rotating skills every 5 minutes, you prevent burnout on any single task. You're constantly switching from input, like listening and reading, to output, speaking and writing.
And that activates different parts of the brain.
It does. And 5 minutes is just long enough to achieve focus, but it's short enough that your mind doesn't start wandering or feel overwhelmed by the task.
So in practice, 5 minutes of listening might be revisiting that short podcast segment from yesterday.
Yeah, and 5 minutes of speaking might be reviewing and practicing those 4 starter phrases we discussed earlier.
My name is, I like.
Exactly. And then 5 minutes of reading could be a simple children's book or just a short news headline, followed by 5 minutes of writing a simple journal entry.
And for the writing, you're just using words you already know, which forces that retrieval practice we talked about.
This is the ultimate expression of the entire methodology. It's synthesized into a daily, manageable habit.
And the sheer impact of that small commitment is what the sources really emphasize. Just 20 minutes a day can change everything.
It really can. Over a year, that's 121 hours of focused, structured practice across 4 distinct skills. It's a colossal achievement built on nothing but micro efforts.
And it connects every single pillar we've discussed. You're hitting your simple goals from part 1.
You're listening daily, part 2.
Speaking without fear, part 3.
Relying on repetition, part 4. All within a single, enjoyable, non-threatening routine, part 9.
So what does this all mean then? We've covered everything from belief structure to specific daily tactics. Let's try and bring it all together with a comprehensive recap of these 10 core pillars we've uncovered for slow and easy language acquisition.
I think this deep dive, it really gives the learner control. It proves that success isn't about some innate natural talent. It's about method and persistence.
And it's about being kind to yourself.
And being smart about how you structure your effort.
Okay, let's run through the full list one last time, just to make sure you have this entire 10-point roadmap clearly structured in your mind.
Okay, so we began with the foundational mindset, the thing you need for longevity. That was part 1. Start small. Set those simple, achievable goals that guarantee quick wins and build your confidence.
Then we established the critical first steps for just engaging your senses. Part 2, listen every day. You have to do this to internalize that acoustic map, the tone, and the rhythm of the language.
Next, you have to activate the language. Part 3, speak without fear. You have to treat every mistake not as a failure, but as essential feedback for your own improvement.
And to cement that knowledge into your long-term memory. Part 4, repeat often. You're leveraging retrieval practice and the spacing effect to make those words and phrases feel effortless.
And then the right way to acquire vocabulary. Part 5, learn with context. Always tie new words to full sentences and functional scenarios. You have to move beyond abstract lists.
And to make sure the journey continues without becoming a chore. Part 6, make learning fun. Integrate the language into movies, music, games, all the leisure activities you already enjoy.
Then, managing the inevitable emotional reality of it all. Part 7, stay patient with yourself. You have to recognize that plateaus are a normal and even necessary phase of consolidating what you've learned into procedural memory.
Then, the ultimate validation step. Part 8, practice in real life. Generate those crucial micro-victories by using the language in functional, low-stakes interactions.
And the structure that sustains the whole effort. Part 9, make a simple daily routine. Ideally, you'd utilize that 20-minute model to balance all 4 skills consistently every single day.
And finally, the essential anchor of the entire process. Part 10, believe in yourself. Understanding that your adult brain absolutely retains the capacity for growth and change, and that the only real barrier is a conviction that you're incapable.
This roadmap, it really dismantles the common myths of speed and talent. It replaces them with the undeniable power of small, sustained effort.
You know, you are doing amazing work just by committing to this process. Adopting this method is already your first massive step toward success.
Just keep learning, keep practicing, and keep going forward. Remember, fluency isn't a destination you arrive at, it's a direction. And every day you engage in that 20-minute habit, you are moving forward.
And we want to leave you with the powerful final thought that really summarizes the motivation behind this entire deep dive. Remember, the world is bigger and more beautiful when you speak more than one language.
It truly is.
Take care and keep diving deep into your learning journey. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.